and we will get things off. I'll give it just a minute while I explain what to do first, while we get the rest of the people in here who are going to be in here. All right, so everybody in here, this is the room where we're going to talk about business reviews in a, what we just call SMB as a broad label, but less than 50K ACV. So if all of you are in that space, you're in the right place. If you are not, drop a note in the chat. Jeff will get you bumped into the other room, which is companies dealing with greater than 50K average annual contract value. So type in, oh, you guys already, we're starting that. Type in the chat where you are from. Would love to see all the wonderful places in the world that you are. I am based in Phoenix, Arizona, and I didn't even formally introduce myself. So let me do that first, and then we'll kick things off here. So my name is Nils Vinya. I'm the founder and CEO of Glide Consulting. Work closely with Jay and the customer imperative team on a number of different projects and initiatives, and getting to facilitate this call with you all is something that's been a blast over the last month or two, however long this has been going. I'm sure everybody feels like Groundhog Day is still happening. So I'm very much in that boat, but excited to be here with you this week. So our topic is managing business reviews in a lower potentially touch environment. Some of you may have a low touch, some of you may still have a high touch, even if you're down from 50K, right? So the goal is understand, one, what are the questions that are on your mind? And the reason I like to go into this first, and if you've been in one of my rooms in the past couple of weeks, you know that it's easier to identify with a question than it is with a solution. So solutions are interesting, and they're going to be very valuable, and we're going to get into those because I want to hear how each one of you is addressing this. But what's sometimes more important, especially right at the beginning, is the key questions that are on your mind. So what I'm going to ask is that if you can share a question that you have about running business reviews in your company for your customers, to click the little participant label there, and then click the raise hand icon, and I'll be able to see you on the right-hand side of my list, and then I'll be able to call on you and be able to come off mute. At the point where we exhaust all our hands, then I'll call on you anyway. So I just love to call on people. Just know that that's going to happen, because I know everybody has a key question on their mind. Otherwise, you would not be on this call, and you would not have an interest in joining, or you just drop right now, which is totally fine if that's the case. All right, first up, Kathleen, would love to please come off of mute and keep yourselves on mute until I call on you, or raise your hand and I call on you, and that'll help keep everything nice and quiet. So Kathleen, please come off mute and share with us the question you have about business reviews in this world.
Yeah, so I think for me, my biggest question is, the frequency. How often do you do it? Is it every single time? I know it's going to probably depend, but that's my question, is how often are you doing it?
Okay, good. Awesome question, Kathleen. Great one. I'm sure it's on the minds. Raise your hand if that aligns with any part of the question that you had. Right? Yeah. Okay, we're all there. Okay, cool. Jeff, would you come off of mute and share with us your question?
Yeah, so how do you encourage the CEO of the company that business reviews are not just a sales opportunity?
Okay, and is that CEO at your company or CEO at the client's company?
No, at my company.
Okay, CEO. Yeah. That business reviews are more than just a sales opportunity. It's not the whole case. Okay. Okay, great. Jaron, come off mute and share with us what you think.
Good morning, Nils.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody again this week. I think a good question to ask specifically with your SMB or smaller customers when you're doing the business reviews or the account reviews is how much do you templatize the review versus how much you customize the review, because you're holding so many more of them, and because typically you have a larger book of business with your smaller businesses than you do enterprise. So I'd be curious to know how much everyone is customizing. We have one approach, but I'd love to hear from everybody else, whatever else is doing.
Awesome. How much customization? Great topic, because you could go to the ends of the earth customizing, and you could probably waste a lot of time too. So where's the right balance between those? Love it. Thank you, Jaron. All right, Emily, please come off mute. Share with us what's your question.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I was wondering if anybody has some good suggestions on how to secure participation from higher level decision makers. We're in a business model where that frontline person is really kind of an obstacle to higher level kind of business owners, and we have a really hard time getting past that gatekeeper.
Got it. Gatekeeper. Cool. The gatekeeper. Something that every single person on this call has dealt with, and I look forward to hearing some creative strategies that you all have employed and used. And next up, Joe. My man, Joe, come off of mute and share with us.
Hey everyone. Very similar to Emily, actually, understanding how we can get the right people on those calls, but most recently with C19, kind of combating that low engagement and essentially getting those calls scheduled. How can we get that strategic review across, but also to how can we do it in a time where we know that this might not be the top priority for our customers?
Okay, good. Thank you, Joe. And after you guys go, just drop your hand, click the same button, it says lower hand, and it'll be good. All right, Kelly. Kelly Hook, would you come off of mute?
Yes. Hi, guys. I just switched over from Enterprise, so hopefully this is not a repeat. But I'm curious what data you're showing most frequently. Is it things like usage of the end user, and that you would make these kind of reports before the executive business review and show it, or you present it in real time?
Cool. All right. What data is in the actual presentations? All right. We got Casey. Would you come off mute?
Hi, everyone. My question is, how do you ensure that you're actually delivering value on these calls, and it isn't just valuable to you, but also to your customers? That's something that I personally struggle with, and making sure I'm not just wasting their time on their end, but getting something for myself.
Love it. Thank you, Casey. Not wasting time. Critically important across the board. All right, we got Dave. What do you think? What's your question?
Thanks. Yeah, Kelly's question actually made me wonder, from a usage standpoint, are there any metrics or indicators you look at that help you predict what the next 3 to 6 months look like with that client, instead of just looking back at the last 3 to 6 months?
So the forward-looking piece, besides just the here's what happened in the past.
Right. What do we predict is going to happen, or what can we get ahead of before we end up at the next QBR with any issues? Yeah,
that's fantastic. Okay, cool. Thank you, Dave. All right. Well, that's a solid chunk of questions. So here's how we'll go from here. We have, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 8 or so or 9 questions, which are all really good, cover a lot of bases on this topic. So what I want to do is just offer the opportunity that if you have a specific comment or a specific suggestion or something related to one of these questions, raise your hand and we'll work through it. Not everybody's going to have a comment on every single one of these. So I'm also going to call on people ad hoc and ask you to share, how are you doing this today? Or how have you thought about this? Because I know you've had some experience in some way, and whatever your experience has been, good, bad, or ugly, is going to help somebody else on this call because they're likely in a similar position. First up, right, was Kathleen's question around the frequency. How often are we doing it? And I would love to ask Joyce. Joyce, are you implementing these? Do you have these going? Are you running these on some regular frequency? Can you tell us about what's going on in your world with these?
Yeah, no, I've recently started with a real estate tech company. So I am mapping out the journey as we're talking right now, and I'm not even there yet. And when you have a very small team and about 2,000 plus customers, all paying, you know, there are some larger companies that pay more, but for the most part, our customers pay pretty close to the same SaaS fees. So I'm not sure how I'm going to handle this, and I doubt we're going to be, you know, doing a lot of outreach, personal calls. Through the journey, we're just doing NPS surveys right now, and I'm using a tool to see who needs more outreach. But as far as quarterly reviews, not there.
Okay, cool. Hey, and like I said, like, your experience is valuable across the board, right? Who else is mapping out their journey, right? Doesn't matter if it's been in place forever, but yeah, see all those hands raised, like everybody's in the same boat. So no matter what, even if you don't have a specific example of this, your experience is valuable. Thank you very much, Joyce. Emily, would you share with us, you know, on the frequency side, are you doing this today? What's it look like? How often? What's your experience?
Sure. And Joyce, I'm actually in a similar position. I'm relatively new leader of a CS team. We have about 7,000 customers, 5,000 are channel and 2,000 are direct. And we've got a lot of little ones. And right now the team really doesn't do any EBRs for that smaller set. But what we're doing is we're mapping out the journey and like re-looking at how we're segmenting customers and trying to be strategic in how we draw up what they should experience. And it could be like our EBRs for smaller customers could be something auto-generated that's just like a report that's sent out to them at a certain frequency and doesn't involve any human interaction. So that's what we're looking at right now. Because I have a team of 5, and with 7,000 customers, like not everybody's going to get one.
So Emily, that's a really interesting point on are you doing the auto-generated report today, or that is something you are looking at?
We are not sending that today. We have something that we could send them that we just use internally. So we're looking at making that something that's customer facing.
Okay, cool. All right, so raise your hand in the chat box if you have some form of automated report like Emily is talking about, like even if it's internal only. Dave, cool. Dave, come off of mute and share with us, what are you doing on the automated fashion? How often is it going out? What's it look like?
Yeah, so we just recently finished about a year, maybe longer journey to transition some of the reporting that we had been building manually over time to in-portal reporting for our customers that they can subscribe to at the time of their choosing. And our goal there is to take the EBRs when we do them for SMBs. So we typically do them about once a year and try to make them very high impact. But to elevate the conversation from the metrics-based kind of conversations that we used to have more to the strategic communication that we're kind of after, which gives us plugs into, you know, requesting that those higher level leaders also attend as well. Like, don't miss it. This is the one thing you can't get on the portal in our case.
Cool. And Dave, just for context, what kind of segment are you serving, and what's average contract value that you're working with?
We go across the board. So our minimum deal is around like 25K at this point, but we go all the way up to high level, large enterprise, and our CSMs handle all of those in between. And so we don't segment CSMs based on that size, but we do handle the customers differently based on their size.
Okay, cool. So in your journey, the CSMs are delivering the service level that is appropriate for the customers based off of their size.
Yeah, exactly. And our philosophy is that, you know, we want to put people in front of people for those things that are most impactful. So we're kind of giving away all the metrics-based stuff, and we're very focused on outcome. So all of our metrics are built in towards like delivering the outcome from our shop, so that they can easily scrape those at any point in time that they want. And one of the key things that we found out about a year ago was that in order to get people super interested in that, we could anonymize all of the customers and put them on a comparison scale, like how they're performing versus their peer group. So we break that down by industry, by size, and hopefully one day we're a security company, by security maturity level, whatever we decide.
Nice. Oh, that's fantastic. And that there's one thing that I know for sure I've seen, and many of you have, it just Dave was just saying, that like the curiosity level to know how you compare against others in your in peers, either in your industry or something similar, is always off the charts and usually plays some kind of role in some of these. All right. So does anybody have a formal program in place? Like, kind of put it at you're not in the stage of mapping out the journey, but you have a formal program in place. You have a regular cadence with your customers from a business review perspective, whether it's automated or whether it's manual and conversation based. If you do, raise your hand by clicking the participants and click the little raise hand. Joe, come off mute. Tell us what you got. Let's talk frequency. How's it work?
Yeah, so for our team, for our customers, we essentially have 2 segments: an unmanaged segment, which is more of a self-help, and then a managed segment, which is actually that has dedicated resources like IAMs and customer success managers. For that managed segment, we essentially are on a two quarterly reviews per year. Well, not quarterly, we call them strategic reviews. The first one takes place 90 days after the implementation. And during that first strategic review, we're essentially going back and realigning with their objectives and their outcomes that they essentially started with upkeep. And we really confirm them with the customer during that time period. Because a lot of our customers are coming out of the gate and they don't have benchmarks and they don't have measures. So we're kind of level setting at that point. And we then have another strategic review 90 days before the actual renewal period, right? And at that time, that motion there is to, one, ensure that renewal is going to take place, but also for us to get ahead of any potential churn risk and also identify any expansions as well. So during those reviews, we're essentially taking a look at team performance. So upkeep is a work order management system, so very similar to a ticketing system. And so we look at work order performance, team performance, and also focus on initiatives for the upcoming next 90 days.
Cool. Joe, thank you so much. So it really interesting there, guys. You notice that it wasn't on a quarterly cadence, or there wasn't a regular piece, but the first one came at 90 days post-implementation, right? And then the second one came 90 days pre-renewal, right? To add a little bit of buffer, but it doesn't always have to be perfectly on a quarterly cadence. It's completely dependent upon the journey that you define. So let's go on to the next question that we had. Kathleen, I hope that gives you some ideas and some things to think about from the frequency and how often to do it. The second question we had was from Jeff, which was all about how do you encourage your CEO to understand that business reviews are not just a sales function. So would love to hear, this is going to be company specific, but what do your CEOs actually perceive these business reviews to be? Rob Glover, would you come off of mute and share with us, like, what's the frame of mind of your CEO? Have you run into this kind of challenge before?
So I apologize because I'm probably not the best to add to the conversation. I'm actually a writer writing about customer success topics, and I was invited by one of the friends of the group. So cool. Sorry I can't add here, but I'm learning a ton. All right.
Hey, all good, Rob. Like I said, hey, you're welcome here, of course, and the more people writing about CS, the better. So all good. How about Clark Fuller? Would you come off of mute and share with us, what does your CEO think about business reviews? What should they be?
I think it depends on the status of the client. You need to really be tuned into what the temperature of the customer is. Not every business review will have the same goals. If they're happy, you'll take a different approach versus if they're unhappy. And in my experience, I think I really like to start with emphasizing the value. I feel like if you start the business review off with that helps blunt a lot of the pain and the questions that might come up later. If you've established at the start of the business review, hey, we know there have been problems, but look at this solid value that we've delivered over the last quarter.
Yep, agree 100%. Reinforce that value because they won't be thinking about all that value all the time as much as you do. So if you have a CEO and you've been in a similar position to Jeff, or some other superior who thinks that these activities should solely be sales driven, right? Has anybody experienced that? And if you have, click the participants thing and click the little raise hand icon. I want to hear from you specifically. If not, that's okay. Then we'll keep exploring this just a little bit more because I want to hear. Casey, would you come off and share with us what's the sentiment around the business reviews for you inside of your company and your leadership?
Yeah, so I've actually recently changed companies within the last 2 months, but my previous CEO had similar mindset that this was an opportunity for me to purely upsell and nothing else. So what I found was the best way to sort of get him on my side was to actually present to him what they should be and what other companies do during this time and why that's super important. That's obviously going to be different between my company and yours, but I had to literally lay it out. He was super analytical, and just telling him that's not how it's supposed to happen, or here's my opinion. I had to actually bring in, like, here's an example of a startup just like us who does it this way, and here's why they do it. And then that resonated with him, and I was able to change my format or keep the format that I wanted.
That's awesome. So did you do an actual mock, like QBR or a business review with him as playing the client, or was this more of just still a high level discussion?
So that was high level discussion, but before the first one I ever did, I told him, like, I'm going to do this by myself. And then I'll let you sit in on the next one. And so I did it first just to kind of get, myself comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then the second client that I did it with, he actually sat in And then afterwards, he gave me feedback and asked, like, why are you asking this? Why aren't you doing this? You could have upsold here. And again, I had to have that conversation a couple times. It wasn't just like a one and done. After he actually sat in, I had to sort of present it again. So again, depends on your leadership, but that's what I had to do.
And what do you think was the tipping point when you realized that the way you were approaching it was better than just going after this from a sales perspective?
Probably when one of our largest accounts was going to leave and then they didn't based on my approach. So seeing that the money that you were going to lose actually wasn't lost, but that didn't mean that I had to actually increase revenue either. Like I saved revenue, which was equally as important. So when that happened, I think he was sort of mind blown that it had that type of power. So I'm really thankful that that customer participated, because if it hadn't, I don't know if he would have been fully on board.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Cool. Sometimes, yeah, you got it. Those are tough situations regardless, but come out like that and see that on the other side and see it actually in action is a job well done. Awesome. Paul, would you come off mute and share with us your experience?
Sure. Yeah. So fairly new to this position, or not position, but this company. And they initially brought me on for QBRs to be a sales opportunity. But I hate that approach, and I don't think QBR should be sales opportunity or sales focused. So what we did is that we're changing the mindset of the CEO to be more of, we're going to be an industry thought leader, and we're also going to use a QBR or a business review to get early adoption for new features. If we're working, we have a new feature that came out. We found out that one of our big clients used an alternative product and they could have used ours. So we missed out on that opportunity. So what we're going to do is we're not going to sell them, but we're going to drive adoption of those new features. And then we work in healthcare. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So we're positioning business reviews to be thought leader of what's going on in the industry, and in particular, our little niche area of the market, which is email security and being HIPAA compliant. So, you know, we're going to talk more on those ideas versus, hey, here's our feature, here's our tech stack, here's all of our options. Like, what do you want to buy? We're not having that conversation. We're talking more about industry trends. We're talking more about, you know, early adoption type of activities, that sort of thing. And the CEO, thankfully, is like behind us and likes that approach as well. So we didn't really convince them. We just showed them our approach and they bought in.
That's awesome. Very cool. And it's interesting how you see the different of opinions of how these can be run, right? Some people think they should be, you know, more sales focused. Some are about identifying opportunities, and some are about thought leadership, like Paul was just sharing. Like, there is no one right way to do this blanket across everybody. It's going to have a little different flavor, and what's going to get you the most value and the most trust with your client, right? Jeff, I hope that gives you some ideas on how to approach your CEO in the situation that you're in. Awesome, thank you. All right, next up was Jaren's question around customization versus standardization, right? And what level are you customizing these versus, you know, you could spend a lot of time going down to the nitty-gritty details for every single client, or you could have one generic thing that applies to everybody. And I want to find out, get a pulse on where you are in anything that you're delivering to your client. It doesn't have to be a formal piece, but some kind of a business review or some kind of an assessment at various points in their journey. Jade, would you mind coming off of mute and sharing, you know, are you customizing things? Do you have these in place? Two, and then what level of customization are you doing?
Yeah, hi. Actually, we are not doing business reviews yet. And the question was from me. I was really looking for information about how to properly do business reviews in a low-touch customer success strategy, because the stand of my CEO is that we should not spend our time, resources doing one-on-one business reviews. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have anything to say about that because I'm looking for tips, but definitely I already got some really interesting takeaways, like, you know, those automated things and mm-hmm. so on that can be done. But it's really interesting to know that, though, in terms of what do we put in those automated things, like do we customize it based on their health, for example, or something like that? I don't know if something is doing something like that, but this is what came into my mind, like something that I could do eventually. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Jade. We will keep on pushing and give you some more nuggets to help fill this out for what it means inside of your organization in not a one-to-one fashion. So Brian, would you come off of mute and share with us what is your experience on the customization level, and are you guys doing this today?
Sure. Yeah. So from our perspective, we have a general outline that we expect the CSMs to follow. And then from there, they are tweaking it to meet the customers, you know, whether it's metrics that we're pulling in or contract terms or what modules they're using or not using. But the objective all along was to provide them enough of an outline / template to where they weren't spending weeks upon weeks filling out business reviews for their, you know, 130 customers per se, across each of their portfolios.
Awesome. I love the outline and providing structure before and letting people fill in the gaps, because it adds, frankly, that's the creative part, right? You got to tell a story somehow. If you just had the same thing canned every time, it'd be a little tough to do it. So Brian, in that outline, you know, how much time are CSM spending if they have 130 accounts? Like, how are you giving them, you know, what's the balance there between time they're spending preparing and delivering with that volume of accounts? That's a pretty significant load.
Yeah, I should have provided a little context. We're not doing it for all 130 customers. We whittled that list down quite a bit. Based on our segments, they probably have call it 15 that they're focusing on out of that 130.
Okay.
So I would say across those, you know, maybe an hour or so on the content, and then we try to do an internal review before we present it to the customer.
Okay, got it. So on those, and how do you select those 15? Like out of the whole 130, is it?
Yeah. So we look at our segments, and a lot of that's revenue driven. So we'll look at those who are paying us more than average contract value. So our average contract value is a shade below 10 grand annually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those that are paying us significantly more will typically get a business review.
Cool.
But that's,
and what's the frequency of those who are getting them? Is it quarterly, once a year?
Yeah, I think we're trying to do it twice a year. And to be honest, before COVID hit, we had budget set aside to go travel to these customers, because anytime you get in person, that's huge. And so we were going to take on the cost, get out in front, really build it up as a really meaningful event, and see what happens.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Anna, would you come off mute and share with us what's this is like in your world?
Yeah, so we have kind of a combination of different types, but what I wanted to touch on was specifically for the small businesses, what we're working on is we have kind of a mixture of standard format of the type of data that we pull, but the data is personalized obviously for the customer. So it's kind of a combined mixture of standard and customized by the very nature of what we're providing them. Since a lot of our conversations are transactional based, just based on what our business is. But what we're trying to do is for the light tech touch customers that don't actually have an assigned CSM, therefore we're not having a personalized conversation with them. What we're working on now is trying to get that piece automated, and how do we, in a way that's, you know, easily digestible and, you know, in a good format, how can we create kind of that e-business review that doesn't require manual intervention and kind of automatically trigger that. I think the major kind of question mark around there is not all customers find all data valuable, right? So for some customers, some data points are going to be really valuable and for others not. For the time being, it's probably going to have to be standardized, but you know, when thinking in the future, it's how do we get even more customized to where we're truly providing them what they deem valuable, which I know kind of came up earlier in the conversation as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Jaron, I know this was your question. You had your hand up before, and I know you deal with this today. So what's your level of customization? How much are you guys doing?
Yeah. So all of our customers are segmented into 3 different customers. We have our enterprise, what we call our key, and then our small to medium business. And we have templatized, just like Brian was saying, a nice template that is easy, that has the key components that we have discovered is going to be most valuable for those customers to know about, like what does their usage of our platform look like? How are, excuse me, how are they measuring on what we have deemed our success score for them, so that they know themselves, oh, this is how they're seeing that I'm measured as compared to all the other customers of theirs. Are we doing well on our platform? And we don't spend as much time focusing on the small customers for their goals as much as we do the high touch customers, right? What have we accomplished in the last quarter? What are we going to accomplish? We do that a lot more for the high touch, not as much the low touch, though sometimes we do customize, because you have to evaluate your customer and know, Is this a customer that is small because they're small, or is it small because they're trying out this new team and there is a huge growth opportunity? So your CSM has to know that too, and be strategic enough to be aware of that. And then they're going to treat them a little bit more like they're going to be an enterprise customer, right? So you always have to be in touch. But we do have a template. It's a single one-page template. It's nice and colorful, has pretty graphs that's easy to look at, read, and understand. And we share that with them. And
how often do you share that one pager with them?
So our cadence right now, and I chatted this in there, is that it's right now it's about every 6 months to a year we have the call, but that sheet itself, we'll share that with them. And most of them we found, the small business, they don't want to meet more often than that. They're good. They're fine with that. Some want to meet a little more often, and when the CSM says, yeah, it's appropriate for me to meet with them more often, then go ahead. I mean, you're the CSM, and I hired you to be the expert on your customers. So do what you need, but general cadence is about 6 to 12 months that we hold a business review.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. So we're going to go on to our next question, which was from Emily, which was how to secure partnership with a high-level decision maker, especially when there's somebody who is a gatekeeper who prevents you from, having full access and being able to get on their calendar and all that fun stuff. So the age-old gatekeeper question. Would love to hear about how this has manifested itself in your world, Paul McManus. Would you come off mute, share with us, do you, run into hiccups around gatekeepers and decision makers when you're trying to get your message from the business review side up into your clients?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Definitely seen it a few times, and sometimes there's you got to understand the motivation for why they're blocking you. If it's because they are control freaks or because they are concerned that you're going to try to sell their boss something, or they don't understand the platform well enough to feel like engaging with the execs is a good use of their time. But we definitely had it with a couple of customers. Sometimes you can wait it out, but the timing matters a lot. If you're coming up to renewal, then it's huge. And sometimes, depending on the personality you're dealing with, you can use tactics like empathy, or explain why you want to engage with their boss and say, we want to make you look good and show off the hard work you're doing. If they don't grab at that and they're still like, no. I mean, sometimes if you're concerned that it's at risk, sometimes you're going to have to go above their head and damaging that. But ultimately, you have to talk to the decision maker. How do we make them look good? That's great, Jay. And it depends on what their job is and what their priorities are. So doing the discovery up front is huge, because if it's after the fact and you're already into the relationship or you got handed the account, it's harder to get the context right and know what their pain is. But yeah, it depends on a lot on what you're selling. And when I was at Clearbit, some of the people we dealt with saw us as a bit of a data commodity. Other people saw us as a strategic partner. So if you're just seen as a vendor selling data, then it's pretty hard to get a chat. And so you have to reposition yourself a little bit and explain why you want to talk to the execs and what's in it for them, I guess.
Yeah, I think that last piece, well, the discovery up front and knowing what role you and your solution actually play in that environment, and then what's in it for them. Like why should they be there? Like they can't be there just because somebody inside of your company said you got to have a decision maker on the phone, right? They have to be there for some valid reason. You got to be able to articulate that and convince somebody that that's appropriate. Kathleen, do you want to come off mute and share your opinion on this?
Yeah, and this is sort of related to the last question as well. I think no one's mentioned onboarding. It's really important to set clear expectations up front so that, first of all, you find out what metrics are important to them, what metrics that their boss cares about. Because if you show that you are a true partner from the very beginning, I mean, obviously what that will do to break those walls and those vulnerabilities down, but it also you need to lead with the fact that they're human first and foremost. And if you show that you really, really care, that you're there to help them get promoted, that you want to show them that you're going to help them look like a real professional. And I think that, when it comes to actually getting other executives on board for these meetings, You need to be, if you're able to, if you don't have too many clients, work with them ahead of time. Say, hey, like, you've got your, maybe a month or 2 month and a half out at a minimum, and say, hey, like, I really want to make sure that we knock it dead, so you can really show your boss how much value you're getting from this tool, because that's going to make them look good. And then it's like a no-brainer. So I think sometimes we have to put on our sale, like I was in sales previously, so you just put on your sales hat, but also like with the CS perspective, and then you'll be able, then it just makes everything. I always joke that I try to make my clients my besties. Mm-hmm. So if you see them as friends and, people that you want to work with for the rest of your life, like, go for it.
Agree 100%. Yeah. Making other people look good is a big part of our job. Paul, would you come off mute and share your thoughts on this?
Yeah. And I feel a lot of the gatekeeping I get is the negative, I guess, stereotype of business reviews. We kind of mentioned about it earlier, where CEOs think it's a sales call, or, that gatekeeper thinks it's a sales call, which is, we're trying to shift that by what I mentioned earlier, being the thought leader and showing them kind of usage metrics and just what's going on in the industry, more than just having a timeshare pitch, essentially. And once people start understanding you're there to talk about our partnership versus just being a vendor, they're more open to inviting other people onto the call. So we're testing it, we're playing around, we're trying different things to prove that these business reviews are just beyond just a sales pitch to get you to buy more stuff. That's not useful for the executive, which why we're getting gate kept, or it doesn't prove us any good if upsells is just one little part of our overall KPIs. So I think it's changing the frame of mind of what these business reviews are supposed to be and have mutually beneficial outcomes. So that's what we're trying, because we shouldn't be selling people, because if we're selling people, we go be AEs and make unlimited commissions.
Right. Awesome. Excellent point there. And that I'll share one tip that I've worked with many, many clients on in how to reframe what is your business review. The word business review has a lot of baggage with it, right? We've all seen that just in our discussions today. Some people have had positive experiences with this. Some people have had negative experiences. Think of it from your client's perspective. Every vendor they've ever worked with has had some flavor of business review. So there's a lot of baggage. But one thing that is an opportunity is to brand this, even though you're doing the same thing, something highly specific to your solution, right? So in the healthcare space, maybe it's a healthcare whatever review, right? It is something that only applies to you. One of my clients had a software platform that was an analytics solution for chief people officers. So instead of business reviews with those chief people officers, they had people analytics reviews. That's it, right? So we created this brand around the thing that they were going to deliver, which was a business review, but we made it so targeted to them that the only experience they ever had was completely controlled by what the company did. And this can be a really helpful way in saying that, wow, yeah, I do actually need to do a people analytics review. Let's do that, as opposed to I need to attend a business review. So just one tip to think about, that you can change the name to whatever you want, and that's part of the fun. All right. Joe, we kind of hit on the topic of getting people on the call. I think it dovetails in with what we were just talking about there. So we're going to go to one more one more question here. I think we're going to be able to hit before we have to go back to the main room. So Kelly asked, what data are we showing, right? Is end user metrics? What format is it presented in? Like, just let's get into the nitty gritty of the actual stuff that you would share to reinforce the value with the client, and call this once a year, twice a year, whatever that is. So if you have something that you've used to date, would love to hear what are the metrics that you are reporting and what's actually in it. Joe, come off mute, and would love to hear what you're doing.
Yeah, so we're sharing a couple of metrics. So one, as I touched on before, was around the actual completion of tickets and performance in the actual platform. But one thing that we found out that was actually really useful, and Rachel, who's joining this call, actually deployed this, was actually showing our internal health score to our customer and explaining them as an internal company how we essentially look at their account. And what we found is that customers really responded well to that. because they essentially felt that as they were getting scored, or they felt like their account was healthy compared to others. The other thing that we also take a look at are really basic metrics like login rates. And the reason why we present that is we want to potentially identify maybe end users that need retrainings, right? And so the customer success managers can then have an action item after that strategic review to set up a specific session with that person. So those are some of the ones that we share.
Love it. That transparency is also great at building trust, right? Look, guys, our job is to make sure you're getting value out of this. This is how we measure you. And frankly, we're baselining against every other company like you in the industry. Here's what you look like. And that kind of hits you in the gut if they're down in the red range or low range or 10 out of 100, whatever the score is. Like that's going to hit pretty hard. Brian, would you come off of mute and share from a data perspective, what's going in this thing?
Yeah, so aside from just some of the platform metrics that we keep in-house, really try to tie it to the customer's business. So my world is a proposal automation tool. So we would say, hey, it looks like you ran 40 RFPs through the tool this quarter. Oh, by the way, you also had a record-setting quarter in terms of sales. How many of those did you run through the tool? So trying to tie it into their business metrics, I feel like is a holy grail too. Sometimes it's harder than others, depending on the platform and what space you play in, but that's what we strive for.
Love that, because if you know how much of that new business came from the proposals you generated, you can tie your value back to them. Love it. Awesome. Who else? What do we got? Let's see. Who have I not called on yet? Steve Schwartz. Would you come off mute and share? Do you do these today? Do you have stuff in there? What's in them?
Yeah, we definitely do. We're sort of on a interesting cadence, I think, compared to some others. We are really focused on Q1 to highlight, like, what does utilization look like? How healthy is everything? And what are the things that we need to do to sort of get on track if things are trending unhealthily? And then Q2 is really focused around our customers are already looking at their budgets for the next year and planning their renewals. And so Q2 is really targeted around delivering ROI and value. And so really seeing, like, did we correct to the things that we needed to in that second quarter to get things on track, or are we trending in a good direction? Are we trending over budget? Q3 really doesn't necessarily need to exist for us, though we do have some reviews with customers at Q3. And then we definitely do a big annual recap review. So we're sort of formalizing the process. Every customer right now, we have about 100 customers. Every customer is getting the sort of same treatment, but that certainly won't continue to be the case as we start to segment. And a lot of this reporting is hugely manual right now for the team. So, we got to get to a point where we can automate a lot more of it.
That's really interesting. Steve, when you're saying Q1, 2, 3, and 4, are you saying that that's the focus during the calendar year, Q1, 2, 3, 4, or the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, that a client's with you regardless of when they signed up?
So I'll give a little bit of background there. So we offer a fertility and family forming benefit to customers to offer to their employees. And 90% of our customers operate on a sort of calendar plan year. And so we're a very cyclical business. We have probably 10 to 15% of our business that launches off cycle, but eventually gets on cycle. And so it is very much like calendar year Q1, Q2, but for those customers that launch off cycle, we sort of use that same pattern.
Cool. Okay.
And it is dependent on when they're budgeting and things happen too, because we do have customers that launch like right after they've already budgeted for the year, or before, and so it might be a year before we hit that cycle again.
Love it. All right, guys, the breakout room popped back up, so we're gonna go back to the main room. Remember, think about two things. Number one takeaway. Number two, what's one action item you can take to put this into action? I will see you back in the breakout room. If we're not connected on LinkedIn yet, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll drop my piece in the chat, and look forward to seeing you there. Cheers.